Hey everyone, today we're continuing with our multi-language Bazel monorepo. So far we've brought in Go, Python, and we've used some generals. We've also set some things up with GitHub Actions. Today we're going to be bringing Node.js into the monorepo. So first of all, we're going to just add a section to our workspace here called Node.js. And if you've watched the previous videos, you're probably used to this by now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our rules. So we have this rules Node.js repository, and I actually don't like it as much as some of the other rules repositories. The documentation is kind of a little bit scattered. So we need to go into this docs directory, and then in here it's quite difficult to know what you're looking for. But first of all, I'm going to go into install.md. And this is going to give us some of the first things we need. So we're going to use HTTP archive, and we're going to bring in the rules Node.js. So we actually already have HTTP archive loaded at the top of this. We do. So we can take that out. Then we're going to bring in the latest version of rules Node.js, which is 5.3.0. We're going to bring in this method, and we're going to call that. And next, we're going to call this, which is going to fetch Node.js, npm, and yarn. This is going to bring in some of the default versions. You can override this if you want to bring in a specific version of Node and yarn, but for now I think this is pretty good. So once that's done, that's kind of the basic setup there. So the next place I want to go is into dependencies. And this has got some of the kind of prerequisites that we're going to need to install some dependencies. So first of all, we have this very simple and basic thing here, which we need. It can get more advanced, but we're just going to stick with the basics here. So this is defining where package.json and yarn.lock are going to live. You can also use a package lock.json to pin dependencies, but yarn is actually recommended there. So you can see here we're loading this yarn install from here. We can actually just move that to up here as well, and we can remove this line. So we can do that, and now we have this yarn install. So something else that we can look at here, our workspace, we need to have it defined. It's probably already defined by default at the Bazel level, but we don't have this managed directories yet, so we need to provide that. And that's just going to let Bazel know where we want our npm modules, our node modules directory to be, and that it's managed. So let's just rename this to multi-language Bazel monorepo. Cool. So that is that. The next thing we're going to need is kind of a root level package.json file. And this is where we're going to define all of our dependencies. So just looking at that, we're going to give it a name, which is just going to be, again, multi-language Bazel monorepo. Just going really simple here. Let's just give it a version 0.0.1, and now let's just give it a dependency section and a dev dependencies section. So I think that that's all the required things that we're going to need. So now if we're using yarn install to use this, we can actually run a command, which is this, I'm pretty sure. So let's add that as a comment. So we can use a version of yarn that's installed on our system, or we can use the yarn that's actually coming in here whenever we're installing Node and yarn. So I kind of prefer to just use this. So that has generated a lock file now from our package.json. we don't have any dependencies yet, so there's actually nothing there. There is a few dependencies that we're going to need, so we could just add them here now. Let's go express, and the latest version is 4.17.3. So we're going to use that as our web server. Dev dependencies wise, we're going to be using, kind of annoyingly, the most supported test runner for Bazel is Jasmine. I generally use Jest outside Bazel. You can set it up with Bazel, but it's a little bit more complicated than Jasmine. So let's just start with Jasmine. Then we're going to need to just bring in Jasmine itself and Jasmine core 4.0.1. Cool. So now if we run this yarn again, now you can see it's actually resolving these packages. It's going to install them and it's going to add them to our yarn.lock. So this lock file now has everything that we need, and we're going to be able to use these dependencies. So now we're actually ready to get started and write our first Node.js target. So we're going to create a new package, and we're just going to call it Node Calculator. And it's going to do the same thing as our Python calculator did. We kind of just had an example, or just a method here, which adds two numbers here, just adds. So we're going to basically do the exact same thing as that, but in Node.js. So first of all, we're going to have a build.bazel, and then let's just create a file called calculator.js. And then our test file is going to be calculator.spec.js. Nice. So now to actually create the calculator, we're going to go module.exports equals class calculator. So we're going to create a calculator class. We're going to have one method only, add xy, and this is going to return x plus y. So that's our really simple calculator class. And now we're going to be able to write a test for this. First of all, we need to bring in our calculator class. Like that. We're going to instantiate it. And then we're just going to have one test method, and it's just going to be 1 plus 1 plus 2 equals 3. Arrow function. So here we're just going to assert that 1 plus 2 is actually 3. So const expected equals 3. We don't even need that, I don't think. And then we can say expect calculator.add 1 2 dot 2 equal 3. And I need a closing bracket here. So now we have our actual calculator class, and we have a calculator test as well. So now we need to use Bazel to run this test and create some sort of a library that can be used from our other Node.js target. So to do that, there is a place here, I think it's called built-ins. And in this documentation, we're going to be able to see some nice things. Actually, let's go to Jasmine first. So if we look at the Jasmine documentation, we can see we have this Jasmine node test, and we can see exactly what it actually takes there. So this is actually coming from our npm dependency. If you remember, we brought in this at Bazel Jasmine. So this is the thing that actually exposes the rule that we need. So if we go back here, we can bring it in like that, and we're going to use index.bzl, and to reference this we actually need at npm, and we're bringing in Jasmine node test. So just to explain this here at npm, this is the workspace that this that our node dependencies are under. So any of our node dependencies are going to be under this npm workspace. And if we look here, we can see that's because of this. So if I do Bazel query at npm and I look for everything, we should actually be able to see here all of the dependencies that we have, including transitives, which is quite interesting. So if we were to grep for Jasmine, we can actually see here that we have this at Bazel Jasmine. So that's what we're bringing in there. So going back here, we're bringing in Jasmine node test. So now I'm going to create a target using Jasmine node test. Like this. So we need to give it a name. Let's call it calculator test. It needs to have sources, which is the sources of the test files, which is calculator spec.js. Like that. And then it needs data, which is going to allow it and give it visibility into how it's going to require this calculator. So the way we're going to do this, let's just create an empty list here. We're going to create a file group that includes the dependencies that we need to pass in here. So let's just use file group, which is built into Bazel, so we don't need to load that. This is kind of like our library. So in other languages so far, I've generally seen there being like a JS underscore binary, a JS underscore test, a JS underscore library. The Node.js one seems to work a little bit differently. I wasn't able to find any node underscore library, so I'm going to use a file group instead. And if I figure something out later, I can update that in the repo. But this works for now. So we have a file group called node calculator. It's going to have sources, which is going to be calculator.js. And then it needs to have visibility. And this is just going to allow other packages across the repo to use it. So let's just take visibility from here so we know the pattern. Oops, did I? Let's copy this again. So it's not going to be Go Web, we're going to provide it to Node Web. By default, this file group, this target, is also visible to any other targets in the package, so we don't need to add this target here. So the data, we're just going to pass in node calculator here. So that's going to provide this test target with node calculator, which is a file group. So then the test is able to bring in calculator there. So let's just try and see if that works. It's bringing everything in. It's compiling everything. It's actually running the calculator test, and it passed first time, which usually doesn't work for me. So if I was to change this 1, 2 equal 4, we can see then it fails. Annoyingly, we don't actually by default get any log here, but we can look at the file and we can see expected 3 to equal 4, and that works. So let's bring it back to 3, and we can see it wasn't cached the first time. If we run it again, it's going to be cached, so it's super quick. So now we have these 3 tests. We can be more specific. We can just test projects, node calculator, and everything under there, and it's just going to run that single test then. So this is kind of our library, and we have, I guess, unit tested that library. Not very extensively, but we have an example unit test. So next up, we're going to create our web application. So we're going to create a new folder. Maybe I already did it. Did I? Node calculator. No, not yet. So node web. In here, again, we're going to have build.bazel. And then we're just going to have a file called index.js. So if you remember before, in our package Json, we installed Express as a dependency. We're going to be using that now inside our web application. So let's just go const express equals require express. The other dependency we're going to need is this node calculator. So let's go const calculator equals require. We're going to have to go back one into node calculator. Alright, so then we're going to say const app equals new express and const calculator equals new calculator, and this should be like that. It is. Alright, so then we just want to say app.listen, and we're going to go with port 8080, and after it's listening we're just going to say console.log listening on port 8080, and let's just provide a route app.get. So we get in a request, which we're not going to use. We're going to send a response. This will need to be enclosed like that. So app.get, whenever we receive a request, we're just going to do res.send. We're going to send back a string, template literal string, and it's just going to be, did you know that 1 plus 2 equals, and then we're just going to use our calculator to add 1, 2. Alright, so that's a really simple Express application which has one route, and it's going to use our kind of library to send a response. So again, we're going to be using built-ins here. One of the built-ins, which is, I guess, the last part of the docs we need to look at. Built-ins, and it's going to be Node.js binary, which is already here. I'm not sure if they have an example of it. They do. So we need to give it a name. I guess first of all we actually need to import it. So let's go back here and see this. No, it's not going to be that. It's actually going to be the same as this. So we can bring this in, and let's use Node.js binary. And the name, we're going to name it the same as the package, Node Web, because that's going to give us a default target. The data is going to be, I guess we might actually need the data, because we're going to be given an entry point. So let's give the entry point of index.js. Oh, I guess we do need data, but the entry point is still going to be index.js. And the data is going to be the projects, node calculator, node calculator. Is that what it's called? Yeah, so this is going to provide this file group as data to our web application, and hopefully that's all going to work. So the other data that we're going to need here is going to be the other thing which we're importing, and that is Express. So if you remember before, I was kind of able to do a Bazel query to query our npm packages. We can actually look for Express, and we can see that Express is there, and we can bring that in like this. So I guess one of the nice things here is we could do Express, but because that's the default, let's just see. Let's do Bazel run projects, node web. Let's see if it works. Listen and port 8080. So it worked first time again. That's amazing. So if I go to localhost 8080, cannot get. I knew that there was going to be something amiss. But anyway, Express is all working. Let's take out this and see if it still works. And let's also try to fix the issue. I actually think I know what I'm missing. Yeah, so I didn't even provide the route, which is just going to be the route like that. And then the second parameter is this anonymous function. So I just forgot to provide the route. Clear. Let's try to run it again and see. So it still worked even though I took out the targets, because these are both the default targets that we're bringing in. So localhost 8080, did you know 1 plus 2 equals 3? Nice. So what did I do for the Python web? Did I go random or, oh, I did. Nice. All right, so that is our next language in our multi-language monorepo. We've brought in Node.js. We've managed to build some kind of a calculator library, and we have a web application, and that's able to calculate, use our calculator and provide that back to the user. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.